Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing the There Are 10 But book tag, which was created by Kieran at Katie Books. He actually tagged me 2 weeks before I'm filming this, which was like end of August, beginning of September, and I didn't watch his video until very recently and saw he tagged me. And now it's halfway through September when I'm filming this, and I figured, you know what's coming up? Kieran's favorite readathon. So I decided in honor of Kieran, we would do a Victorian Victober edition of this wonderful tag. So everything I mention as my answers for this video are going to be Victorian works, and I know that Kieran will absolutely adore that. Really, this whole thing is just in honor of Kieran at Katie Books's and Kate Howe's wonderful relationship, and especially in regards to Victober. And what better time to upload this than on the first day of the greatest readathon of all time. So prompt number 1 is there are 10, but they are over 500 pages. And for this, I had to go with an author who is incredible and writes a lot of long books, and that is The Way We Live Now by Anthony Trollope. Many of you probably thought I was going to say Charles Dickens, but he'll show up later in this tag video, do not worry. Anthony Trollope is an incredible writer, absolutely love his works. This was the first book I read by him, and it's still probably my favorite of the ones I've read by him, although I have really enjoyed the other two. This book follows a ton of different characters and a lot of different plot lines that all kind of connect to different scandals and situations going on politically as well as just socially at this time period in London particularly. And it's just so entertaining and wonderful, and the characters are just brilliant. There's so many different types of characters, different backgrounds and relationship dynamics, and it's just incredible. I remember I listened to this one on audiobook for the first time I read it, and hopefully in the future I'll reread it just physically. But I seriously laughed out loud so many times driving to and from work just listening to this wonderful book, and yeah, it's amazing. It's a 10, but it is really, really long. Prompt 2 is there are 10, but they're on pre-order, and many of you are thinking, wait, all of these books came out over 100 years ago. There's no way you can pre-order any of them. But there's always companies coming out with new editions every year, and I can always pre-order those. So I ended up pre-ordering Goblin Market. Oh, can you see it? Maybe not. Goblin Market and Other Poems by Christina Rossetti. I do not own any of her poetry, including Goblin Market, and Macmillan Press is coming out with a new edition of that. I literally spent like an hour researching this just so I could pre-order a Victorian work just for this tag. So I spent $15 on this tag. You're welcome, Kieran. Frankly, I just don't pre-order all that often anyway, so I probably would have just had to pre-order something for this tag even if I didn't do Victorian style, but either way, this is going to arrive at my house in October, and I'm honestly pretty excited about it. I've heard good things about Christina Rossetti, and I could use more Victorian poetry on my list, so there we go. Side note, also in honor of Kieran, while I did pre-order that, I also ordered a Salman Rushdie novel. I have never read him, but I figured if I was going to do this for the tag, I would also, in honor of Kieran, get a Salman Rushdie novel, just out of respect for all Kieran does. So there's that. That should be coming in the next couple of weeks to me as well. Moving off of that tangent and into prompt number 3. Prompt number 3 is they're a 10, but they're a red flag. And of course, this could have meant for the author, this could have meant for the book or the character, and I ended up kind of doing a little bit of all three, and that was Vanity Fair by William Thackeray. I honestly don't know a lot about William Thackeray, but what I have heard does raise some red flags for me, so that's unfortunate. But I did love Vanity Fair. It's absolutely wonderful. However, Becky Sharp, the main character, is also a red flag, but man, I just adore her. She's wonderful. She's brilliant. This book is so fun to read. The adaptations of it are so fun to watch. This book is set during the Napoleonic Wars, and we follow Becky Sharp as she climbs her way through society in all sorts of different ways. Additionally, we have a foil for her in Amelia, who's very sweet and kind, and she's also dealing with a lot of different social situations and problems, and it's just a wonderful book. I absolutely adore it and would recommend it if you haven't read it before. I know some people don't like it, so there's that as well, and maybe it's because there's such red flags surrounding it, but I still love it personally, and I'm excited to reread it, honestly, again and again in the future. Prompt 4 was really easy for this because they're a 10, but they're over 100 years old, which clearly everything on this tag for me is going to be over 100 years old. But I decided to go with a book that I know Kieran loves, and I know is like really central to Kieran and Kate's relationship, and I just, in honor of them, I wanted to mention it for this tag. And that is, of course, Wives and Daughters by Elizabeth Gaskell. This wonderful book follows Molly Gibson as she just experiences life with a new stepmother. She also has some romantic entanglements, as well as a stepsister that she's also learning to deal with, and it's just charming. Elizabeth Gaskell is wonderful at writing very interesting characters and relationship dynamics. Personally, I do like North and South a little bit better, but this is a close second for my favorite Elizabeth Gaskell novel, and it is wonderful. Absolutely adore it, and I understand why Kate and Kieran really bond over this book. Prompt 5 is they're a 10, but they were studied in school. And for this one, I had to kind of think a little bit because I didn't personally read a ton of Victorian literature for school, at least not in high school and junior high. So I have kind of three answers for this. The first one is based on what I've seen other people talk about reading in school. I didn't necessarily read this in school, but like I said, I've heard other people talk about it, and I really do enjoy this book, so I'm going to mention it, and that is Great Expectations by Charles Dickens. When I was thinking about Charles Dickens, particularly for this prompt, because I feel like most people, if they read a Victorian novel in school, it was most likely a Charles Dickens novel. For me, it was not, but we'll get into that in a second. So I considered A Tale of Two Cities because I feel like that would be more likely to happen, but I actually haven't read that, so I felt a little weird putting that in this particular tag. But I have read this, and I did enjoy it, and I'm pretty sure people have talked about reading it in school, and I could understand people struggling with it in school, but it's a really great book. It's a really great novel, and Pip is a very fascinating character. There's a lot of interesting social dynamics going on. Miss Havisham is just so fascinating and wonderful to read about. I do prefer David Copperfield over this as far as Charles Dickens goes. I haven't read a lot of his works, to be honest, but I do like David Copperfield a little bit more. But this still is a 10 in my mind, despite the fact that many people had to read it in school. If we're talking about what I personally read in school, I have two that I'm going to briefly mention. I've mentioned them a lot on my channel, so I'm not going to go too into depth about them. But I did read in school, actually in the same class, Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë and Tess of the D'Urbervilles by Thomas Hardy, both of which are still favorites of all time, not even just for Victorian literature, but of all time. Absolutely adore them, and I did read them both in school, and people who complained about either of these just don't know. I feel like they're more likely to complain about Wuthering Heights. I feel like most people I've heard talk about Tess of the D'Urbervilles who read it in school, which isn't a lot, but those who I have heard end up really liking it, at least enjoying it to some extent. But Wuthering Heights is such a divisive book that I could imagine some people really not liking it, having read it in school, but it is a masterpiece. You can say all you want, all the issues you have with the characters and everything, but you can't deny Emily Brontë knew how to write, and she created a really engaging plot, regardless of how you feel about the characters and their actions. And prompt number 6 is they're a 10, but they will leave you emotionally wrecked. And for this one, there were several I considered going with. Of course, I already mentioned Tess and Wuthering Heights for this particular tag, so I didn't want to repeat those. But I did still end up with 2 for this prompt, and I'll explain why in a moment. So the first one I have here is The Trumpet Major by Thomas Hardy. I just felt like this prompt called for a Hardy novel because most of his don't necessarily end very happy. I considered Jude the Obscure, but I'm gonna be honest, I don't consider that one a 10, unfortunately, even though it did wreck me. But this one I love, and it does not have the happiest of endings, and it did leave me emotionally scarred at the end of this book. I was really upset about how this book ended, but it was so good. It was so wonderful. It's again set in the Napoleonic Wars, and we just are following these country folk and their complicated life situations. In particular, we of course follow this love triangle square. I think there's 3 men. I'm not totally sure, but I'm pretty sure there were 3 men that are kind of involved in this. And we're just following this pretty simple story, but over it all is this eerie sense of they could be attacked at any moment. They're afraid of Napoleon and his armies. They live on the coast, so if Napoleon comes across, they're going to be the first ones to be attacked. So there's a lot of just stress about that that's shown throughout the narrative. Plus, at least 2 of the 3 men are soldiers in the army, so that also impacts how things are going on for them. And it's just wonderful and so good, and it's one of Hardy's shorter ones, so that's really nice. But like I said, I have a second one because I just wanted to spread the love to at least one other author in this tag, and so I decided to go with Adam Bede by George Eliot. This one doesn't end totally sad, but there's just a lot that is sad about this ending, and just about the story in general that just feels so melancholy that it does just wreck your emotions. And and in just an incredible way, I should say. It's wonderful. These characters are brilliant, but it does hurt. It definitely hurts to see how they all end up. We follow Adam Bede as he's in love with this girl in the town, but she's in love with another man, and then there's this other woman who comes to town who his brother is in love with, who is a Methodist preacher, I'm pretty sure. She's some sort of preacher. And like I said, Adam's brother is in love with her, but there's just all these complicated feelings about it, and just a lot happens that is really sad, like I said, but it is beautiful. George Eliot is wonderful. And if you want to just read something that is sad, but still has that little bit of sweetness throughout it, and even in the ending, there's still that little bit of hope, Adam Bede definitely will provide that for you. So that is it. Those are my answers to this wonderful tag. I hope, Kieran, that you enjoyed this and that you're enjoying your Victober. I guess I'm posting this the first day of the month, so you probably haven't really started yet, but if you have started anything, I hope it's just been wonderful. I look forward to all of your Victober content and your Instagram posts. I'm sure they will be wonderful. And as for you viewers, thank you so much for watching. Let me know down below if you've read any of these or if you're interested in any of these books that I've mentioned, as I would love to know. I hope you are having a wonderful start to your Victober, and I will see you next time. Bye!